This is the Washington Times front page for Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Gerbo. President Trump says he will impose steep secondary tariffs on Russia if the Kremlin doesn't reach a ceasefire deal with Ukraine within 50 days. Kerry Pickett reports Trump also announced that he would send more U.S. weapons to Ukraine after meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House. The president had said the U.S. would send a new weapon supply for Ukraine, including more advanced Patriot missile defense batteries, which NATO member nations are expected to fund. Secondary tariffs are U.S. levies imposed on other countries doing business with Russia, not on Russian exports to the United States. Trump has suggested that such tariffs could be used on nations buying Russian oil and gas. President Trump's decision to link tariff rates to Brazil's prosecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro is complicating his defense in a legal case over the sweeping levies. Lawyers representing 5 import-heavy businesses sued the president in the spring, Tom Howell reports. They say he overstepped his executive powers by arguing that trade deficits are so damaging that he must impose tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. The plaintiffs say Trump is bolstering their case by tethering tariff decisions to non-trade matters, as is the case with Brazil. The president pointed directly to Bolsonaro's prosecution in proposing a 50% tariff on Brazilian goods. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit consolidated that suit with a similar lawsuit from a dozen Democratic-led states. Oral arguments in the case are scheduled for July 31st. The Supreme Court has allowed President Trump to move ahead with mass firings and deep cuts at the Department of Education. In a brief order, Stephen Dinan reports the justices said the ruling of a federal court in Massachusetts is stayed while the case develops further. A U.S. district judge issued an injunction against the cuts in May. He said the president's defense that he was reorganizing rather than abolishing the department was plainly not true. Justice Sonia Sotomayor led the Supreme Court's 3 Democratic appointees in dissenting. Former President Biden acknowledged in an interview that former Chief of Staff Jeff Zients authorized last-minute pardons signed by an auto pen. Susan Ferruccio reports Biden acknowledged that thousands of pardons were signed with a mechanical signature and not his hand during the final hours of his administration in an interview with the New York Times. Biden said he approved the pardons, but not each one specifically. Emails showed decisions were made by top staffers and were approved by Zients. Zients is among the top Biden administration aides now at the center of investigations by the Department of Justice and the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And finally, Attorney General Pam Bondi has ordered the elimination of federal websites, notices, and forms offered in languages other than English. Stephen Dinan reports she said agencies should assess their multilingual offerings and determine which ones aren't required by law or aren't absolutely essential to operations. They should then eliminate them and use any savings to promote English instead. Bondi rescinded a Clinton-era policy that made it easier to bring civil rights violations against those deemed to have discriminated against someone based on their lack of English proficiency, and she suspended the department's webpage that offered guidance to other agencies, urging them to provide access to government services in different languages. Find all of today's front page stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page or on the Washington Times app, and find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on social media at Wash Times for breaking news, sports, commentary, and more. For the Washington Times, I'm George Gerbo.